Okay, hey folks, Mark Locklear here, and this screencast on Chapter 7, How to Code Functions. So this idea of functions in software development is really the first step toward thinking about sort of beginning to abstract, what I call abstracting your code, or starting to separate out functions of code. You could also call it modularizing your code. You're creating sort of modules, if you will, that are little code snippets that you can call or reuse anytime you like. So I think what we're going to do for this screencast is I'm going to get you started on the assignment with chapters. I think it's exercise 7.1, the miles per gallon app. And what I'm asking you to do there is create implementation and header files, and then we're going to place functions inside those files. So this is not terribly, I don't think the concept, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I don't think the concepts here are terribly difficult. However, the IDE tends to be kind of persnickety, if you will, and if spelling counts, syntax counts, and if things aren't just in just the right place, then you can run into issues. So, okay, so this is the miles per gallon app. This is the book solution. The solutions in the book have already been implemented, so you should already sort of be at this point. And I think you'll notice here that we've defined calculate Mpg and display file data. We've created methods with those, and for instance, the calculate Mpg method is defined here, and of course we're passing, and just to walk you through these, notice it's being called here, line 60, calculate Mpg. The arguments we're passing in are miles and gallons, and then you can see that's being called down here, and again, those arguments have to be specified in the method definition. So here you can see the arguments, miles and gallons, are being passed in. We're doing the calculation here, and then we've got a return statement, miles per gallon. That variable is being returned back, and then of course back in the main program, that's what's being assigned to the miles per gallon variable here. Okay, so for starters, let's go ahead and create our, I think what we'll do is create our header and implementation files, and then maybe we'll just create a dummy, sort of a fake method, just so you can see how it all sort of works together. So the first thing I'm gonna do, so this is gonna be a little different if you're in Visual Studio, although it should generally work the same way. The IDE would do a lot of the creation of those files, implementation and header files for you. So as much as you can use use the IDE to your advantage there, you should. So I'm going to create a new file, and then it's going to be a new C++ file. Now notice here, and again, it may be different in Visual Studio, Xcode gives me the option to go ahead and create a header file. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and create that. So functions is just the word, which could be a little confusing to use that. You can name this anything you want. I'm going to name mine functions, and then I'm leaving this box check that says create a header file also. So I'm going to go next. Again, I'm going to drop it right inside in this case, the miles per gallon folder. I'll do create. And then now notice I've got a functions.hpp. Could be .h or .hpp depending on the platform you're on, but that HPP is going to be your header file. And then notice I've got this functions.cpp too. And the functions.cpp, of course, is the implementation, what we call the implementation file, and then functions.hpp is the header file. Also notice, it drops a lot of the comments in for you by default, and again, at least in Xcode, it already defines the if defined statements that have to be there in the header and the implementation file. Notice it's got these here, and then this end if, so it includes a lot of that. That stuff for you. So I think what we'll do first is we're just going to sort of create a dummy function here. Again, I just want you to see how all the parts, all the moving parts work together. So I'm going to start here. So when I'm creating a new function, I'm going to start in the header file first and sort of create the function definition first, and then we'll do the implementation file, and then we'll actually implement it inside the code. So in this case, we're going to I'm going to create a method called int, and then I'm going to call it addition, and then it's going to accept a single argument of an int. In this case, we'll call it num, and then I'll just close that statement, okay? So the idea here, just so you know what we're planning on doing, is we're going to create a method that's going to accept a single argument that's a number, and then we'll just add some number to it and then return the result back to the main program. Again, just sort of a contrived method just so we can see how all the pieces work. And then in the implementation file, I'm just going to paste in this code. I've already done this obviously off screen, so rather than you having to watch me type. So here, addition. So here I'm going to create a method. So this is we're actually going to define the function and what it does. So again, the name of it is addition. Again, it takes a single argument that's an int, or it's a number. We're calling it num. We could call this num, we're calling it num. We could call it anything we wanted here. And then we're defining a method, or defining a variable called result. In this case, we're doing num plus 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 5 to whatever number we pass to this method. And then, of course, we're going to return the result back, okay? So now over in our main file, let's see where. Let's just stick it maybe right at the top. Let's see if we can get this to work. I think I'm going to try it right here. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to put a comment that says test contrived function. And in this case, we call our function addition. So let's just see if we can stick the result right inside a cout statement. So if I do cout, in fact, rather than you watching me sort of fumble through this, let me pause the video and I'll make sure we've got it working, and then I'll start it back up. Okay, so to get this working, it took me a little bit to figure out what I needed. So notice that I'm calling the addition function here, and then I'm passing an argument. Remember, we set one argument we're going to pass to it up. So in this case, I'm passing a 5 to it. So remember, we're adding 5. The function is going to take this number in, add 5 to it, and then return the result back. So in this case, we should be seeing 10 when we run the function. And then also remember, you need to include this function's header file, in my case, functions.hpp, up at the top, so it has access to it. Like, just so you know, like the error I was running into is that when I went to run it, let's see if it'll throw an error if I save this maybe. Yeah, notice, I get this use of undeclared identifier addition. And so in this case, the program, the compiler, doesn't know what addition is. It's not a variable, it's not a method. It doesn't know how to process that. The reason is because, again, I need to include this function's header file at the top. That gives the program access to all of the methods that are defined in the header file. So in that case, notice that the error message is gone now and says, okay, I know what addition is. So again, if we run this, notice we get 10. That's just the output at the top. I didn't put any text with it. So notice we get the output of 10, okay? So I just wanted to do a real sort of stripped down version of adding a method to a program, so you would know what, sort of know what all the moving parts are. Okay, so let's just do one. I'll just do one of the examples in the book that I asked you to do. So I asked you, I think I asked you to create a get miles driven method to move some of this code out. So again, this is the idea, and we could do the same thing with these calculate miles per gallon. We could move those methods out, and that would probably be the efficient thing to do. That would be the right thing to do, is move these calculate miles per gallon and display file data, move those methods out of the main program and put them in the functions, in the functions file. Just again, this idea of sort of moving some of the code out. I mean, the whole point here is, I mean, notice we're already at 100 lines, over 100 lines of code with this fairly simple program. Imagine a very sophisticated program, the number of lines you've got. So you really want to keep your main method as clean as possible and abstract various methods out to different places. In fact, in a more sophisticated program, we'd probably have and again, I'm just trying to make stuff up here, but you might have a miles per gallon header file that would have methods just associated with that. You know, you would have a different header and implementation file for sort of all the different areas of the program and different things that the program does. But so in this case, let's look at moving out get miles driven. We're going to create a method. We've already got the code for it here, but we just want to create a method for it, right? So we can go over to our header file and we'll add let me make sure see if I can get this right the first time. So in this case, I'm going to do a double just so we can handle decimals if we want to. So I'm going to say double. In this case, it's going to be get miles driven. Okay. And again, this double just defines what the return statement, the data type for the return statement inside the method. Notice we're not accepting any arguments here. All right, inside the implementation file, here's where we actually define what the method is. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is create. So this is going to be double, and this will be get miles driven. Open and close curly braces, and now we're going to go to main, and we're just going to grab this whole chunk here. So I'm going to do Command X or maybe Control X if you're on Windows. Go to functions, and then we're just going to drop this whole chunk inside here. All right, now notice immediately we get a bunch of errors that are thrown up, so let's go ahead and fix those. So first we've got this undeclared identifier miles. So basically that's an undeclared variable that that C++ doesn't know about. We defined it over in the main, over in our main method. Notice we've got this double miles here, but notice we haven't defined it here. So there's this concept called scope in software development, and the scope of this program is only in this functions.cpp file, so that's why it doesn't know what it is. Here, all we need to do is it's going to be an int, so all we need to do is just put int in front, and that will take care of that error. That's going to define that miles variable for us, okay? The other thing we're running into is notice on couts, cin statements, we're getting errors on all of those. So that's simply because we haven't included the IOStream header or include file inside this file. So we're going to go to the top here, and I'm just going to paste that in. And when we say that, yeah, notice so now we're getting a little different error. So again, we could go in and add STD in the front of each one of these. But I think we can just go in and let's do that, save it. So that gets rid of that. And I notice here, just so we're clear, and let's see if this actually works. You could have went into each one of these cout files, and I think I could do std : No, I thought that would have gotten rid of that, but okay. So, but if we use our using namespace standard up top here, that'll take care of that for us. And then the final thing we need to do, control reaches end of non-void function. That doesn't really give us a real good explanation. The problem here is that we're expecting a return statement, right? It's not void. The method's not void. That means there needs to be a return statement there. So in this case, we're going to return miles. And let's save that. And so that gets rid of that error for us, okay? So we're good on our, from the implementation standpoint. We've got our header file, we've got the method definition in our header file. We've defined the method here. One last thing we need to do is we actually need to call the function, right? I mean, if we run the program now, the user's not able to input the miles, right? So we need to have that there. So to do that, yeah, we'll do, so again, this is going to be the miles variable, and all we need to do now is call get miles driven. And notice too, if you use the ID, notice how it knows get miles driven shows up here in the ID because I've defined it over in my header file. So that's how the ID sort of knows that it's a method that's available to you. And then if I do that, let's save it, and then let's run that and see. Okay, build succeeded, that's good news. And then let's test it out. 400 miles, 8 miles a gallon, that's 50 miles per gallon. Great, that works, okay? So that gives you an idea of sort of start to finish using these implementation files and header files, and also this idea of functions too. And again, we could move these, if you'd like, as an experiment, take and, the calculate Mpg method. You'd go into your header file, create the method definition here, calculate Mpg, and then you could just simply cut and paste all of this out into functions.cpp, and then it would be available to you inside the main method to call, okay? So that is method definition. We'll be expanding upon this going forward. Generally, that's the way we want to do, as we create methods going forward. Sometimes I'll ask you to create the header file, sometimes not. It does add another layer of complexity to the programs we're writing. For the most part going forward, there may be one or two other instances where I'll ask you to create header and implementation files, but for the most part, you can create everything inside the main method. You can just have your, the methods that you create, you can have them inside your main method. You don't have to create header and implementation files. It just sort of keeps things simple. But this chapter does allow you to go through the process of creating header and implementation files, just so you know how it's done. And I think for the final exam, I think the final project that you do, I think I'll also ask you to do header and implementation files. Okay, that is all for now. Good luck, and let me know if you have questions.